And we've got at least one councillor online, and we've got some others that are apparently joining.
Oh, Jocelyn's online.
Yeah, I'm online.
Hi, Jocelyn.
Hi.
Glenn, are you
I'm
there?
living
Glenn
there.
Olsen?
Yes, I am here. Yep.
Yeah. So Glenn Olsen is the chair of the Paraparamu Community Board. So we're just waiting for the live streaming and then we'll get underway. Oh, it's on. Great. Welcome to those who are on live streaming. And I'll pass over to Mark for introductions. We also have Miles O'Connor here from Bancorp on Zoom.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to today's briefing just on the Treasury Management Policy. So online we have Miles O'Connor from Bancorp, and so Miles is actually online and will be supporting me and answering any questions that you may have. But Miles is unfortunately unwell, so Miles has COVID. So thank you, Miles, for dialing in. So
that's all right.
So Miles and I, we're gonna team tag this one, but I think what I'll try and do is I'll try and take you through the changes, and then when it's really hard technical questions that I can't answer, then I will defer to Miles, as Miles is our independent Treasury expert. So we have a little presentation to take you through. It's only 12 slides, and we should be able to wrap up in an hour. So without further ado. So just by way of an introduction, so the current Treasury management policy.
Sorry, Mark, I'm just going to interrupt just for a second to let Miles know that we've also got David Shand, who's the chair of our Risk and Assurance Committee here.
Thank you.
It's good for people to know.
I could turn my camera off. I don't want to know if you look at it. You want to look at a slightly dishevelled, unshaven advisor at the moment.
So Miles is here, but he may turn his camera off. So so just to set a little bit of context, so we actually have a current Treasury management policy that was last adopted in 2017 as part of the 2018-21 LTP process. It hasn't had a full review since then. That's because the 2007 as part of the 18-21 LTP process. With LTPs, you actually do review your Treasury management policy, so they go hand in hand with your revenue and financing policy and your long-term plan. So as I've said, Bancorp are Council's independent Treasury advisors. We do work in collaboration with Bancorp. All of our Treasury transactions are first checked with Bancorp, and they advise us on whether our transactions are good, bad, ugly, and we find a way of actually doing the right thing. They have actually done a full review of our Treasury management policy, our current one, and that's the one that, and they made changes with recommendations, and those are sitting in the draft Treasury management policy that was adopted on the 28th of March by Council, as it is part of the long-term plan process for the next one, the 2024-34 long-term plan. So at that meeting on the 28th of March, the paper had some incorrect references. Council did resolve to adopt a draft policy, but there was a request to come back and actually take you through the changes, which is actually the main purpose of today. So on your LG Hub, you do actually have the presentation behind me, but you also have the policy document itself, which is in the track changes format, which I will be using that as my map. So we'll be stepping through the policy. It's not a big policy. We'll be stepping through that page by page, and I'll explain just the track changes, and then we'll wrap up at the end. So, but please just ask questions as we go along. It's not an easy policy. It is technical. It is Treasury management. So, but we'll go through. We'll go through the changes, but ask any questions you like as we go through. So, how I've structured the presentation. So on the next slide, you can go through both. So you can follow me in the policy itself, or you can follow me in the presentation. So the presentation is picking up all the changes, all the track changes that are in the policy in the order of when those track changes appear. And it just explains what that change is. So I'll do my best to explain them to you. And then I do have Miles to support me. So without further ado, just in terms of the slide, we've got changes. So officer changes is effectively council officers. So those are mainly editorial changes if we've picked up a committee that no longer exists. So O stands for officer changes, and then Bancorp changes are B, so that you know whether the change has been suggested by our Treasury advisors or officers. Right, so without further ado, so I'm going to start on the policy page 5. So I'm talking to the first section of the presentation. So this is an officer editorial change. So paragraph 10 has been deleted because it actually refers to a committee that no longer exists. So that's the Strategy and Operations Committee. That was a committee of the past triennium. We have a Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee. So what we've done is, in this particular one, we've actually deleted that, and the policy is now providing that it's only council that can approve changes to approve the Treasury management policy or any changes to that policy. But council then can delegate responsibilities of the policy to any committee it chooses. So in this case, it's currently been delegated to the Risk and Assurance Committee. So we're trying to future-proof this policy as well for future trienniums. When we change governance structure and delegations, we don't necessarily have to go and change the policy. So we're trying to get a little bit of future-proof. So easy one, paragraph 10 on page 5 has just been deleted because that committee no longer exists. So that's the first one. So we've deleted paragraph 10. Okay, then moving to, on the policy, page 6, the objectives, the limited management policy. So this is a change from Bancorp, and we've included 2 additions to the objectives to reflect best practice. And it's to ensure that the funding risks are managed by maintaining an appropriate spread of maturities. And then it's a bit of an update in part. So Standard & Poor's is actually known as S&P Global, but it's just also, so it's really updating the policy to reflect the correct name for S&P Global. And it's also saying that one of the objectives of this Treasury management policy is that Council has a credit rating of at least A- from Standard & Poor's. But it also refers to 2 other independent credit rating agencies, which is Moody's and Fitch. So Council may, in the future, I'm certainly not saying we will, but we may, in the passage of time, may actually have a different credit rating agency. So the policy's objective is to achieve a credit rating of at least A- from one of those 3 credit rating agencies. Some organisations have credit rating agencies from multiple, or have credit ratings from different agencies, like LGFA, for example. So that's just an editorial change. Nothing to be concerned about. Staying on page 6, moving to paragraph 14. We've deleted the last bullet point of paragraph 14 to invest in the Kapiti Resilience Fund and the Kapiti Growth Fund. So this policy was last updated in 2017. So the council does not have a resilience fund and does not have a growth fund. And there was a little bit of pushback from the OAG. So it was there as a future-proof mechanism, but we've now just taken that out of the policy. We don't have those funds.
Just for clarity, Mark, the paragraphs you're referencing are the new paragraphs numbering after we deleted that paragraph 10, so everything's sort of shifted up one. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you, Councillor. So on the presentation, so the first one I've said deleted para 10. So that's paragraph 10. So that's 10 of the old policy. Where there has been a new policy, the change on the presentation is reflecting the new paragraph number. But that's right. Once we delete and move things, the paragraph numbers have changed. So if it's a new paragraph, the PowerPoint does actually reference the new. Generally we can see that in the track changes of the policy as well. So thank you for that. Staying on the same, so the next point is on page 6, paragraph 17 of the Treasury Management Policy. It's deleting that paragraph. Any debt with maturity beyond 12 years must be reported to the Strategy and Operations Committee. Now, it's deleting that paragraph for two reasons, because the Strategy and Operations Committee does not exist, but also since 2017, our GFA have actually issued a standard 12-year bond. So there's an April 2036 bond. At the time of actually including that in the policy, you couldn't go longer than 10 years through LGFA. We only borrow through LGFA. So that provision was in the policy because you couldn't get debt for longer terms with the LGFA. We no longer need that because we can go 12 years. We're bound, we've got limits on our debt, and we report compliance to the risk and assurance. So we simply don't need paragraph 17. So that's just, it's redundant, effectively. So we've taken that out. So that's the first page of the slide. So that's one slide done. Okay, going across to page 7 of the policy. So I'm now at the table. So what we're doing with this table, so it's effectively paragraph 16, which overflows onto page 7, the top of page 7. So all we're doing is we're adjusting our borrowing limits, our net external debt to total operating income. So we've made a change. It's increased to 285% for the 24-25 financial year, and it's 280% thereafter. So that's an adjustment we've made to align those debt limits to the limits that are imposed by LGFA. So LGFA, in 2020, LGFA introduced what's called alternative debt limits. That was in response to COVID, and they went up to 300%, and then they ratchet down to 280% over time. So we're just literally updating the table, and we're aligning to our financial strategy for the 24-34 long-term plan. We've said for year 1 of the long-term plan, our debt limit is 285%, and then we go to 280% from years 2 to 10. So it's actually just aligning to LGFA and to the financial strategy. So it's best practice recommendation.
Just to put that one into context, Mark, the LGFA are considering, as I understand, increasing that to 80% on a bespoke basis. It could go into the mid-300s, and that's specifically to accommodate the growth councils who may well breach the 280%. I think it's 280. It goes down to 280 by 2026, I think. But it's primarily, everyone knows who the growth councils are. It's Oronga, Hamilton, Queenstown. I think there's 2 others. I'm not sure if Stelwyn's one of them or Waimaka Erie's another one. But it's just that that may change on a bespoke basis.
Thank you, Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Miles. Nicola Willis actually mentioned that this morning when we were having breakfast.
Sorry, who mentioned that?
Nicola Willis did, yeah.
Oh.
So that's twice I've heard about it today, and I hadn't heard about it before.
No, we the recommendation would be to leave it as it is. It may change on a bespoke basis. Our strategy is to get our debt down, not go up. So moving along to the next block, this is a Bancorp recommendation that adds a little bit of text to paragraph 17, new paragraph 17. So this paragraph basically just says that council's debt is secured on its rates by way of what's called a debenture trust deed. So our rates revenue is used as security for council borrowings. And a little bit's just been tacked on at the end that said that all our secured lenders rank equally on a pari passu basis. So we've put the Latin term back into the policy, and it just says that any secured lenders, so those that provide lending to the council, rank equally. We don't have any preferential credit creditors. So that's just reflecting best practice.
Just one thing on that, as far as your guarantee goes to the LGFA, it's important to note that it's on it's in proportion to your ratepayer base. So if the guarantee was actually called up, it would only be, as I say, in proportion to your rating base. The percentages are on the LGFA website for each council. I can't remember exactly what Capity is off the top of my head. Do you know, Mark?
Oh goodness, not off the top of my head, but we disclose it in the annual report. I think it's obviously ramped up, but it's in the 20% region.
Oh no, it'd be less than 2, I think. I think Auckland's 20 or something, 28.
Oh, well,
That's all
we'll have a look, Miles.
councils rank equally. All councils rank according to their ratepayer base.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks, Miles. So the next change is to do with the borrowing mechanisms. Still on page 7, there's a deletion of a bullet point for paragraph 19, and so this is the Bancorp recommendation to delete that, and that's because. So the deletion is consideration of counterparty credit risk by spreading borrowings across a number of counterparties to avoid concentrations of credit exposure. So it's basically just saying if you're borrowing from multiple parties, spread that risk by borrowing. Don't borrow everything from one. But this is not a practical provision for this policy because at the moment, so LGFA was set up with the sole purpose of providing lending to councils at least cost. So we cannot borrow money cheaper from anywhere else. So we borrow solely from LGFA. We can't get it any cheaper. So we don't need a provision in the policy that says spread your debt across multiple providers. If I get anything wrong, Miles, please just correct me. Yeah. It's important that we get this right. Okay, so thank you. So the next one
that explains it perfectly.
The next one. So the next change is actually paragraph 24, which is on page 8 of the policy, and that is it's an officer. Page 24. It's an officer recommendation. It's an editorial. So it's a fix, and we're just looking to simplify the wording to reflect LGFA changes to its borrowing documents. So the original paragraph was a bit wordy, so we've just simplified it and made it a bit more succinct. So it's an editorial change. Then so the next one is in relation to new paragraph 25, page 9 of the policy. And again, this is an officer recommendation. It's an editorial change to reflect the changes that we made to the borrowing limits. So it's basically saying that 280 borrowing limit of 285% applies for 24-25 and 280% annually thereafter. So it's just following that correction we made through the policy. So an editorial change. That's the next slide done. Okay. So nothing on page 10. Then we get to page 11. So again, new paragraph 33 on page 11 of the policy. It's an editorial change from officers. It's regarding the authority to acquire and dispose of financial investments. So in layman terms, that's where we do pre-funding. And we put the pre-funding on term deposits. So we'll put money on term deposit and then we take it off term deposit. So that's an acquisition and disposal of financial investments. The authority was delegated to the Group Manager Corporate Services, and we've just extended that to be in consultation with the Chief Executive Officer. So what that means is there's a memo outlining the acquisition and disposal, the rationale for doing that, plus the endorsement from Bancorp. So we're putting a bit more robustness and process to that. So that part, so that's that. Then staying on page 11, dropping down to page 30, paragraph 37.
Can I just note something, Mark?
Yeah.
New paragraph 31, which is 32 or 33 on here. There is an editorial change in there that you haven't recorded.
Yes, sorry. Paragraph 31.
The new paragraph 31. So at the top of page.
Yes.
The page we're on, page 11. Top line, these.
These.
There.
These. So
it's just an editorial change.
It's an editorial change, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
But then that sentence becomes ungrammatical. If these are strategic or other valid reasons for doing so. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So moving down to so we're looking at the property investment. So page 11 of the policy, and it's new paragraphs 36 and 37. There's been some minor changes. So the council makes this policy does make some provisions for property investments. The change that's been made, it's editorial. It's recognising that council has adopted a process of purchasing land when the opportunity arises. I think the strategy is still being developed. So it was referencing a strategy that's in development. So we've corrected that. And then paragraph 37 is editorial changes. It's removing the committee that no longer exists, and it's future-proofing it by making sure that the approval is by council or a delegated committee. So again, editorial change. Staying on the same page, 11, paragraph 39, it's exactly the same. So we're just removing the Strategy and Operations Committee that no longer exists and future-proofing by replacing that with council or delegated committee. So that takes us to 39. So thank you. So there's no changes on page 12 of the policy. Then we get to page 13. So we're talking about now. So the financial investments. So this is a Bancorp best practice change. So the recommendation is to remove. So I'll start with the top part. Financial
Can I interrupt
investments.
again, Mark? Sorry.
Of course.
Page 12. Old paragraph 42, new one is incomplete. Is there a return that continues that paragraph into 43 on page 13? Like 42 is an incomplete paragraph. I assume 43 is an incomplete paragraph starting, so those two are probably one paragraph. I don't know, I'm just asking the question.
Yes, thank you.
Which puts all the numbering out later, so probably don't correct it just at the moment.
Yeah,
just make a note.
Yeah, I think it's just we've somehow split that paragraph. Yep, thank you. It looks like the paragraph on the top of page 13 is actually linked to the paragraph 40 on the top of page 12. So it's a formatting issue. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay.
That's why we do drafts, right?
Yes. So, financial investments. So, I'm on page 13, paragraphs 43, 44 and 45 have been recommended to be deleted. And that is because they've been replaced by Appendix 3 at the back of the policy, which we'll discuss later. Managed funds. So managed funds, this relates to the Kapiti Resilience Fund and the Kapiti Growth Fund. As I said earlier, this was put in 2017. We don't have those funds, so the change is to actually take the managed funds section out of the policy. So that's a deletion of 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52 and 53 A, B, C, D and E, as it all relates to those two funds that don't exist. So I'm now on page 14 of the Treasury Management Policy. Okay, so apart from there's no further changes on page 14. Noting that because of that paragraph split, our paragraph numbers are slightly out, but we'll just talk to the one that's in front of us. Okay, page 15. Okay, where am I? 45. There we go. I think I'm over here. All right. So this is where we're at in the PowerPoint presentation. So we're at the top, and we're on page 15 of the of the draft Treasury Management Policy Track Changes version. So we've made an amendment. Yeah.
Sorry, what was that Windows? To show the two documents on the one screen that we were talking about earlier.
Oh, if you press your Windows key and an arrow to the left.
Ah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Splits the screen so you can. Okay.
I'm stuck like that, and I'm just living with it.
Do you want to do it too? You can put them both on the same screen if you want.
No, I'm okay just doing this.
Okay. Oh, because you don't have a Windows. Yeah. It's a Windows. Okay, so look back to page 15 of the policy. New paragraph 46. This is a best practice change from Bancorp, and it's just really it's what it's doing is it's strengthening or making a more extensive definition of what liquidity risk is and what what liquidity risk management actually is. So it was a little bit light in definition, or it was fine. It was fine in 2017, but there's best practices to have a more fulsome definition. So it's just really defining what liquidity risk is. Oh, it's 46. 46 on page 15. It'll be, yeah. So the paragraph numbers will change, but the changes are the same. Okay. So is everyone with me? Okay. All right. So the next one. So dropping down to we're staying on page 15 of the policy, and we're going to paragraph 50. So we're making this is an editorial change by Bancorp. This section of the policy is talking about liquidity and funding risk. That first paragraph is talking about funding risk. So we've made a correction. So the word liquidity has been struck out because that is what funding risk. So that particular part of the policy is describing funding risk and not liquidity. So it's a correction.
Just one thing on this, Mark, if you want me just to add something. This is one area which is actually a little bit misunderstood sometimes, and I've seen in quite a few policies people include liquidity and funding risk in the same paragraph, or they don't make the proper distinction between them, and it leads to a little bit of confusion. So, you could have it the other way around, funding liquidity risk, but just to make it easier, because the new 50 deals with funding risk. So that's why we've put that first. So funding is the funding that you obtain, which is from the LGFA, to fund all of council's external debt. Liquidity is just, that's not funding. Liquidity is what you have to maintain, and Mark will talk about this in a minute, I guess. What you have to maintain is standby, sources of readily available funds, which are 110%. Oh, actually, I'll be going into that in a minute. So yeah, so just remember, funding risk is just your underlying funding. It's not liquidity.
Thanks, Miles. And I think there was a good suggestion there. Just the Treasury policy says liquidity funding risk. We'll swap that around. We'll say funding liquidity risk, because that's the policy talks it in that order. So, okay. Thank you, Miles. So moving down to that's paragraph 50 that we've discussed. Now 51 paragraph A, there's a slight editorial change there. Sorry, it's not an editorial change, it's best practice. So now the policy is talking about liquidity, and liquidity is about having sufficient funds available for new debt and rollover debt. So the policy is just reflecting that. So it's reflecting best practice. And then paragraph 51B is just an amendment to the formula that we use or apply to measure liquidity. So the policy describes what the formula is. It does the numerator and the denominator. And it actually aligns the formula that we use is slightly different to the LGFA, and so what we're now doing is we're aligning to the formula that's used. Sorry, LGFA. The formula has now been changed to align to exactly the same formula that the LGFA use, because we have to maintain a minimum of 110% liquidity. That's a requirement of LGFA. LGFA check us every year on our what liquidity do we have. So we were using slightly different formulas. So now with this change, we are measuring our liquidity exactly the same way. And the only difference is the denominator is council's forecast debt over a 12-month period. So the numerator uses council's actual debt that it has, its external debt that it has at that reporting date. But the denominator of the formula is what we're forecast for the next 12 months. So they're two different amounts. So it's a best practice, complicated change. Thank you.
And it's what all councils have, just about all councils have this one. So it's not that you're doing anything unusual. It's just, as Mark said, it's best practice and it's conforming to the LGFA, which you have to conform to anyway.
We're on page 15.
So those words in B, that really outlines the formula that we're using, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Yep.
Sorry, just noticing AB doubles up. It goes AB, AB, CD.
70 that's in the wrong place.
Right?
Are you on page 15?
Yeah.
So I've got 51A and
B.
I've got 51B.
And then what have you got on the next page? It's number 70 for some reason, random 70 there.
That random 70's in the wrong place. It's
Right.
formatting. It's meant to be on
And then page 16 goes A, B, C, D.
So that's right. That's right. So on page 15 we have 51.
Sorry, gotcha.
And then
No,
we've got
that's
52.
number 7. Gotcha. Here
Yep.
you go. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So
Penny just dropped.
look, apologies. Showing you a track change version is in itself it brings in a few anomalies and complexity. So yeah, a no markup version is much easier to follow, but you can't see the changes. Okay, so we're on page 16 of the Treasury Management Policy, and we're talking about paragraph 52 now. So we've made a change to 52A, so that's the top of page 16, and that's Bancorp best practice recommendation. So our pre-funding is well regarded by S&P Global. The policy restricts us to only being able to pre-fund up to 18 months in advance of debt maturing. This recommendation is actually to take that restriction out. So we can if we want to, this change enables the council to pre-fund as far as it wants to. By having that restriction, it means that we potentially aren't able to take advantage of certain markets. So it's just removing the restriction. But the pre-funding has been really well regarded by S&P. We've sort of done the crawl, walk, run on this. So at many years ago, we didn't pre-fund at all. Then we had a window of 12 months. Then we extended that to 18. So now we're in a position of strength. We've got a good pre-funding program, so we don't need that restriction. Okay.
In reality, I don't see, you doing much, an awful lot of pre-funding out beyond 18 months, because it's that 12 to 18 months window that S&P look at. But just as Mark said, if, just because of changes in the credit markets and the interest rate markets, if there was a discernible difference or a discernible benefit gained by pre-funding out beyond that 18 months, we didn't want you to be restricted to that. We didn't want to restrict you to not being able to do it simply because of that provision. So I don't see it being used too much, but it's there just for your benefit if the situation arises.
Are there any risks associated with removing that 18 month?
No, I can't see any. No, I mean, there are no risks, but there are benefits.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Righto.
52B and C, these are, this is officer editorial changes. We're removing a non-existent committee and we're future-proofing with council a delegated committee. So just, then we get into, so this is a big one, the funding control limits. So this we're on, just make sure we're on the right place. Okay, so we're now on the presentation. We're in the last row of the slide deck. So the funding control limits. So this is a Bancorp. This is actually a combined Bancorp and officer best practice recommendation. So
which slide are we up to, Mark? Sorry.
I don't have slide numbers.
Page 16.
I don't have slide numbers, Miles, but it's the slide that starts with change new para 52A at the top.
Change new para.
If you switch to gallery view in your Zoom, it should come up on the screen.
Okay, yeah.
You with us?
Yes, I've got it. Yes, yeah, I've got it.
Okay. And we're on page 16 of the Treasury Management Policy, and we're talking about that bit of red in the middle, funding control limits. So the funding control limit. So what this is. So the recommendation is to there's four-time what do we call it? Four-time buckets. So this relates to our actual debt and the maturity of the debt that we take on. And currently, at the moment, the policy says that between 0 to 3 years from your reporting period, you must have no more than 10%, and you must have a minimum of 10, but no more than 70% of your debt maturing between 0 to 3 years. You must have a minimum of 10, but no more than 60% of your debt maturing between 3 to 5, and then there's limits for 5 to 10 and 10 years plus. So this is actually really complicated. It's pretty old now, and it's complicated. It is forcing you to take on new debt and manage the maturities within those time brackets, even if the market conditions are not right. So you may, for example, if we aren't compliant. Generally speaking, short-term debt interest rates are lower than long-term, but the markets go up and down. So if we were not complying with 0 to 3, we would need to take debt out to make that matured between 0 to 3 just to comply. Or if we weren't complying in the 10-year plus, we would actually have to go and borrow money and have the maturity 10-year plus to comply, even if we didn't need it. Even if it was if the market conditions, if we could get cheaper debt at a different maturity. So we've recognised this, and the recommendation is to let's move away from these time brackets and change over to a funding control limit of no more than 40% of council's debt shall be subject to refinancing in any rolling 12-month period. So which reflects best practice for the industry. So it's simpler to manage, and it means that we can actually take best advantage of the market, and we can actually pinpoint the most advantageous debt maturity windows for the council and not be confined to these 4 time brackets.
So what we've seen in the past is that councils have, as Mark said, councils just have to manage their funding just to comply with the policy, and it's actually disadvantageous, and it's more of a hindrance, and it actually, it forces you into almost micromanaging some exposures. I know the bands are reasonably wide, 10 to 70, 10 to 60, 10 to 50, and 0 to 20, but I've still seen councils become non-compliant simply because exposures that are, say, in the 5 to 10 suddenly fall within the 3 to 5 because of the process of time erosion, and therefore it leads to non-compliance. So what we've found is that the 40% can be managed more effectively. I know 40% is reasonably high, but the reason for that is that often, although it doesn't happen with Kapiti so much, is that if you move to having more commercial paper, that will naturally fall within the first time frame. So you have to have a reasonably high number to enable you to conform with primarily the first time bucket. And it's important to note also here, and this is also missed out quite a bit, it's a rolling 12-month period. It's not a calendar year and it's not a financial year, because otherwise, I mean, you could have, say, 40% of your debt maturing on the 30th of June and 40% of your debt maturing on the 1st of July, and you're still policy compliant, and you're having 80% of your debt mature within 2 days. So it's a rolling 12-month period, not, as I say, not calendar and not financial years.
Thanks.
So, just for clarity, for my understanding, we've got wording on the screen that says no more than 40% of debt shall mature in any rolling 12-month period, and on my document it says shall be subject to refinancing. So maturing and refinancing, same?
Same thing.
Same? That's what I
same.
thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. So just staying in that region. So there's some more changes in that paragraph below. That paragraph is just saying to who must we report to when we breach the Treasury management policy. So again, we've removed the committee that no longer exists and changed that to council or delegated committee. So it's got a future proof. So it's an editorial change. And then a little bit about having to reforecast its debt requirements. You have to do that anyway because of the rolling basis. So it's redundant. So there's so those are the changes. So that's probably one of our biggest changes, to be honest. So thank you for noting that. Then we move on to. I'll just move my slide. So we're on page 17 on paragraph 68. So this is a Bancorp recommendations, best practice. The recommendation is to delete it.
Sorry, Mark, I'm going to interrupt again. Sorry. There's one underlined under interest rate risk. It's one removed completely. Old paragraph 75, probably new paragraph. What would that be?
Oh, yeah. It's even
It's highlighted
highlighted.
in yellow in ours. It's got lines through it.
Yeah.
All bank deposits, registered certificates of deposit, treasury bills, and commercial paper investments are limited to a term no greater than 180 days unless linked to a pre-funding strategy.
So that's what I was. So on my version, it's so we're talking about the same one, but yours is 75. Okay, mine's different.
And yours is on page 17 and ours is on page 16. Is that?
Okay. I don't know why that is. So it's the same one.
Okay, cool. Great.
It's the same one. Yeah. Okay. So it's paragraph 75 that's highlighted in yellow, bottom of page 16. So this paragraph has been recommended to be deleted because it is saying that all bank deposits, all our investments can only be invested for no longer than 181 days, and it's a restriction that doesn't need to be there. So the advice is to actually to take it out, because actually everything to do with investments that the council makes is now governed by the appendix at the back of the policy. So it's restrictive, so we delete it, and we're deleting it because it's redundant. It's replaced by something different.
Okay.
Okay, then the next one is the interest rate risk control limits. which is my page 17. Okay.
Yep.
And so I have it, so for me it's paragraph 17, but I'm talking to changes on page 17, 18 under interest rate control, interest rate risk control limits. So this is Bancorp. So as you can see, so the current policy has a master fixed floating risk control limit, minimum of 55%, maximum of 100%. So we're recommending delete this. So what this is saying, this master control limit is saying that as a minimum, 55% of council's debt must be fixed by way of a hedging instrument, by an interest rate swap for the whole time. And then it also, similar to our debt maturities where we had the 4 time buckets for our hedging instruments, it has 3 time buckets, and its compliance is measured when our hedging instruments actually mature. And so Bancorp have had a look at this and gone, actually, this doesn't make sense. So the whole purpose of a hedge is to protect the council from rising interest rates. And if you apply a 55% minimum, when interest rates are down, you're not benefiting from lower rates because you're making sure 55% of your debt's always hedged. So the limits have lowered, but how we measure it is we say we're compliant because we've got swaps. So many swaps mature in 0 to 2 years. So many percentage of swaps are maturing 2 to 4. And the example that's been given is just demonstrating that the way of measuring this is it doesn't make sense because the example on my slide. So, sorry, this little table there is what Bancorp was saying. You know, these are the control limits that you should put in place for your hedging. So it's replaced what we've got with between 0 to 2 years. You should have, so time period 0 to 2 years. Your hedging should be a minimum of 40%, maximum of 100. Between 2 and 4, your minimum hedging should be 20%, maximum 80. 4 to 10 years, minimum no hedging, or maximum 60. So it's driven by time, and it's different. So it's not a flat 55% across the board.
So they're new figures that are in here, just because we don't have red.
Yeah.
So,
yes, those are the new figures.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not sure what I did. It's not showing the old table. So the example that we've got on there, there's a lot of words there in Miles, and I talked to it before.
I think it is showing the old, isn't it?
Yeah,
the old table?
that's the master limit, but there was a table in there that showed the old time brackets. So
okay.
those are the new ones. Yeah.
Good out.
Okay, so it's recommended that we move this way so that we hedge, we protect the council, but we don't over hedge. Great when interest rates are high, not so good when interest rates are low. And to explain why we're moving into this model, there's a little example behind us. So for example, if we had $200 million of debt and we had a $25 million swap for 8 years, but that's all we had. We had $200 million of debt and a $25 million swap. We're 12.5% hedged, and we're 12.5% hedged for 8 years. So under the old way of measuring, we would be saying that we've got a swap that matures in 8 years. So in the 5 to 10 years, that swap only gets recognised in the 5 to 10 year bucket. It doesn't recognise that we're actually are hedged in the 0 to 3 and the 3 to 5. So it's not actually measuring to what level are we being hedged. It's just saying you've got that master control limit of 55. When are your swaps maturing? Excellent. So hedging is actually a different mechanism. It's very different to funding risk. So these changes are just actually realigning us to best practice. That old way of doing it was what other councils were doing. That's what the Treasury advisors were advising us at the time. It's not well understood. It's difficult, and so we're moving to a better practice, and it's simpler and it's more advantageous for council to do so with less risk.
If I could just jump in here for a minute, Mark. As Mark said, there was the 55 to 100%, which was your hedging bands, and then the swaps had then overlaid over the top of these with these swaps. They had to have it fall within those maturities. I understand what they're trying to do. Well, I think I understand. I don't think many people do. And this was introduced by another Treasury advisor. And as I understand, well, not as I understand it, I know that they've moved away from this and they don't use it anymore. And they use something that is very similar to the one we use now because of the lack of understanding of it. I mean, I've asked some corporate treasurers who've used it and CFOs who've used it. And I said, well, how do you interpret this? And how do you know you're policy compliant? They said, oh, our advisor tells us that we are. So, I mean, one of the fundamental tenets I have in this is that a policy must be understood by the people who are tasked with implementing it. And if they can't understand it, then and they just have to rely on someone else to tell them that they are, then I don't think that's best practice. So we actually struggle with graphing the for policy compliance reasons, graphing the ones that you already have. We can put it in, but it doesn't make much sense. And as Mark said, I mean, an 8-year swap provides hedging over 8 years. If you wanted to achieve the same thing under this policy, under the old policy, you'd actually have to have 8 one-year swaps to fit into each time bucket. So you'd have that same maturity. Well, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's having 8 times the number of swaps. So I just stress that and as Mark stressed also, it doesn't increase your risk at all, but it makes managing your risk a lot simpler and a lot easier to understand.
Thanks, Miles. So I've solved the mystery. So what we've done on page 17 is we've put in the new risk control limits in the table, and then the master fixed floating, all that has been, there's a strikeout, so it's been deleted. And if you move over to page 18, the old way of managing our hedging is in the swaps maturity profile table on page 18. So that's what it was. So we've inserted the new one and deleted all the text that relates to what we're changing. So I've moved over to page 18 of the Treasury Management Policy. I'm still on, in terms of the slide deck, I am now on I'm at the top, so I'm on this slide now. So I'm at the top. So paragraph 74 on page 18 of the Treasury Management Policy, new paragraph 74, the authorised risk management instruments. So there's just there's an editorial change, or it's best practice on the slide. So it's a best practice change from Bancorp. The policy refers to forward rate agreements. These are no longer used, so it's an update. So it's removing that from it's removed the forward rate agreement reference, but it's also added fixed rate bonds and fixed rate term loans to the definition of authorised risk management instruments.
And just on that one, a fixed rate bond actually is a funding instrument, and it's also an interest rate risk management instrument. So you use it to obtain fixed rate. You use it to obtain funding. Actually right up until now, you've used floating rate notes and overlaid swaps over the top of them. You mind if I just spend a minute on this because it's quite important? We actually prefer to use fixed rate bonds rather than floating rate notes where they're appropriate, because they're a lot easier to manage. With a fixed rate bond, there are 2 rate resets a year, so they're every 6 months. If you take a floating rate note out, then there's 4, and then to achieve the same thing as a fixed rate bond, the same outcome, it's you have to do a swap, which is 4 interest rate resets as well. So you've got 8 interest rate resets compared to 2. You achieve the same thing, although then I'll just go and contradict myself. You achieve the same maturity profile, but if you compare it exactly like with like, there's about a 7-point benefit by doing a fixed rate bond rather than doing a floating rate note and putting a swap over it to fix it. This might be getting a wee bit technical, but it's an often missed out point in Treasury policies that a fixed rate bond does exactly the same as a swap, but more efficiently.
Thanks.
Can't guarantee that we have 100% level of understanding of what you just said around the table, but I think we've probably got a sufficient level. Yeah.
I believe everything Mark says, and I trust him 100%.
Thank you.
Councillor Spires just said if Mark thinks it's okay with her.
Thank you.
I just looked up the word swaptions because I'd never heard of it before
Yes.
and said if it's a real word.
Yes.
It is.
Yes. Yes.
Swaption.
It's an option. It's an option on a swap.
Yeah.
They're not. I've hardly ever used them in my career. They're very rarely used, but there are occasions when they are advantageous. I mean, it'll be like a Haley's Comet moment.
I can't.
Probably if you used it, but I mean, they are appropriate every now and again. I don't see them used in councils very much, but I thought for the sake of putting out a word, we might as well.
Okay, swapalicious.
So
Let's move on.
we'll move forward. So we're just going through the changes. We're not trying to go into the detail of Treasury. This just allows us to use different hedging instruments. We've just on page 18 is just updating what are the authorised risk management instruments. We could come back and talk to you about swaptions and interest rate options if you like, but the changes that we've made to the policy just allow us to actually use those hedging instruments if market conditions are more favourable to use those. We typically just use interest rate swaps. Okay. Is there a question? No.
We're all good.
So, page 19, counterparty credit risk for derivatives. So I'm on the next on this slide. I'm on this slide, Miles. Change to new paragraph 62, 63, 64. Okay, so just on page 19 of the policy, we are just extending. There's an edit to counterparty credit risk for derivatives because that's what it's actually talking to. So it's just really an edit for clarification. Paragraph 62 is just it's an edit to reflect S&P Global's new name, as well as if we were to ever use the other 2 independent credit rating agencies. Or Fitch, yes, it should be. Yes, thank you. That should be nicely picked up. Two things now. Okay.
Actually, Mark, we shorten S&P when the first time we use it, so we might not have to replace it with S&P Global Ratings.
Yeah.
Just a very minor one.
Yeah. Then 64. So we've so look, 64 is very technical. It's a Bancorp recommendation. It reflects best practice. It is a different methodology to measure our counterparty credit risk exposure. There's a little formula in there. Miles is comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with it. Effectively, what it's saying when we have a hedging instrument in place and we're in the money. So when we're in the money, the bank owes us money. It means that the fixed rate that we receive is higher than the floating rate that we pay to the bank. And it's just saying that we just need to be mindful that we need to be mindful of the duration of on our swaps. If we owed money, we need to look at that duration and our exposure. We can't be owed more than $10 million. So it's a fancy way of looking at our swaps and saying, if you're in the money, how long are you in the money for? What's the notional value of your swap? How much money are you potentially owed on that hedge instrument? And and we can't ever be owed more than $10 million because the policy is then saying that risk is too high. So I'm not saying any bank ever would, but if the bank defaulted, we wouldn't get that money. If we weren't using an interest rate swap, if we were using another hedging instrument and the institution defaulted, we wouldn't get that. So it's just capping effectively our debtor exposure to 10 million on our hedging instruments.
Nigel has a question.
Yeah, just a question. What's the source of the methodology that calculates because it's a new methodology, right, to calculate exposures to derivatives? Is that terrestrial, or is that from the States or wherever?
I'm going to pass that one to Miles. So Miles, paragraph 64, that new formula of mark-to-market plus 1% of fair value per annum, where does that come from?
Oh, it's one that's just been adopted in financial markets for quite some time, and it's viewed as best practice as far as managing counterparty credit risk goes. I don't know if this was also part of the question, but the underlying source data that you get to measure your exposures, or what your counterparty credit risk is on the swaps, is derived from daily market information, which is primarily on Bloomberg or Reuters. So it's an independent financial market platform. So the genesis of the methodology is global. I think it came out of the States quite some years ago, and the ongoing management of it is on a globally recognised platform.
Yeah, I have some misgivings about globally recognised platforms because we've seen what they've done in the past. And so the degree of exposure so the methodology that calculates the degree of exposure to derivatives, but is there a formula about what's the maximum amount that can be exposed?
Yes, well, the formula limits you to $10 million.
Right. And is that 10 million regardless of what your overall numbers are? So it's just 10 million. Someone's pulled that number. So Auckland City Council would be limited to 10, and we're limited to 10.
Oh no. So that's specific to each council.
Right. So
I mean, there are some who would be quite a bit less. So it's taking into account the actual size at KCDC.
Right. Okay. That's cool. Thanks.
Just one thing on the swaps is that you're unsecured. I know that someone might say, well, this is in contradiction to Appendix 3, which is your investments, and you can invest in banks and you can have more, but if you're exposed, if you have an exposure on swaps, you're actually unsecured, where there's more security with the investments. And I can talk about that in a minute when we get onto that.
So thank you. So look, we're nearly there. I'm just conscious of the time.
Just much as editorial, but there's actually two things actually. One was first, I just wanted to go on record as saying how super impressed I am that Nigel Wilson here next door to me, one, asked that question, and two, understood it. So absolutely blows me away. On that particular paragraph, second line from the bottom, it doesn't quite make sense. Well, it just might be me. It goes 40 million with had an average duration of 3 years. That just might be a little correction.
Yeah. So thank you, Councillor. So how it works is your mark to market value is 3.5 million because you're in the money, and then it's 1% of your fair value per annum calculated on the average duration of your derivative. So you take your 40 million and you multiply your average duration as 3. So for this example, you take your 40 million, you multiply it by 3 years because the average duration of your swap portfolio is 3 years. So that's 120 million. 1% of 120 million is 1.2 million. Add 1.2 to 3.5 gives you your 4.7 million. So I know the tendency is actually to divide by 3, not multiply, but you're saying, look, that's my swap portfolio. That's the value of my swap portfolio, but my duration is 3 years, so that's why you multiply.
Which coincidentally is the same number as our depreciation on our water.
That's look that is completely coincidental.
Oh, I was going to tell you so.
All right.
I've
So
seen that 4.7 come up a lot, actually.
so
I think it's a really technical phrase, in the money or out of the money. That's really technical. Just saying. Sorry.
All right. So, look, it's not in the changes, but basically, in the money is when the our swap, basically we're in the money when the swaps that we have, when they cost more money on today's market, we're in the money. So we've been protected.
If interest rates go, if you have a swap at, just take one for example, at 3% for 5 years, and the current 5-year rate is 4.5%, so you're 1.5% in the money. So the easy way to describe it is that when interest rates go up, if the interest rate is above your swap rate, the current interest rate is above your swap rate, you're in the money. And if the current interest rate is below your swap rate, you're out of the money. If we don't mention out of the money in this at all, because we don't really care if you owe the bank money, because you would. It's only when the bank owe you money. We're just trying to protect KCDC. We're not so concerned about the banks if you owe them money.
It's a snapshot situation, though, isn't it? Because you can be in and out of the money in a volatile interest market, right?
Yes.
Changes every day.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think, look, that covers the changes on page 19. So that's the paragraph 64 that Councillor Halliday questioned. So going over into page 20 of the policy, paragraph 65, there's a little table. All we've done is we've tidied up the table. As I've said in the slide, it's an editorial change from Bancorp. The table's just been tidied up, and the table's been simplified because the policy talks to the other sections in different parts of the policy. And then on page 20, there's
just one thing, Matt. Sorry, Mark. This was an often misunderstood area because I'd had the following counterparty exposures apply to KCDC's bank exposures, and what the current table did, it combined, because you have two different types of exposures. You have the exposures when you've got swaps, and then you've got exposures when you have financial market investments, and they confused the two, and they actually combined the two, and it didn't make any sense. So you have to separate the two out, and that's why we've got that table and we've got the one at the back.
Thank you. There's one change on page 20. It's paragraph 69. I haven't put that on my slide deck. I missed it. It's an editorial change to clarify that it's derivative financial instruments. Right. Okay. Page 21 of the policy. New paragraph 70 has got no change. So it's a new paragraph. But foreign exchange risk, paragraph 71. So what we have simply done is we've simplified the provisions relating to foreign exchange risk. Notably, the change is as it shows, all foreign exchange exposures greater than 250,000 must be hedged using forward exchange contracts. So the council doesn't really deal in foreign exchange. We aren't purchasing large kits for our projects from overseas. We purchase library books from overseas. So this is not an area that we actually get anywhere near to $250,000, but the Treasury policy provides. It's a lot of books. So staying on page 21, moving down to 21. Moving down to paragraph 75, Treasury performance.
Sorry, mate, just before you go to that, so just a hypothetical, the clip-on bridge in Waikanae. So the deal, we were a 50-50 deal with NZTA, but we were kind of like the silent partner who just put up the money. But if we were an involved partner, and given that was being sourced in Australia, is that an example of where, because it was $1 million, so our exposure is 500,000. So in that situation, we might try and mitigate foreign exchange risk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Exactly right. Okay. So Treasury performance, paragraph 75, page 21. Where am I now? So we're talking to the Treasury performance. So I've done done. Which ones I've changed to new? Foreign exchange 71. Sorry, I'm trying to keep us true to the presentation as well. So Miles, we're on the presentation. We're on the page that starts changes to new para 75.
Yep, got that.
Okay, so this is a Bancorp best practice change recommendation. So it's an edit. So with our treasury performance, it's just setting out. It's effectively C is just making sure that our treasury performance. We must make sure that we're compliant with the treasury management policy. It's just spelling it out. But the big change one is D. So D is quite complex, and I'll try and simplify it for you. So, and this actually comes up from time to time. So what D is doing is introducing a benchmark interest rate, effectively. So we've talked about for the long-term plan, we budget an interest rate. And right now, when we report to the Risk and Assurance Committee, we show our actual weighted average cost of borrowings compared to what we budgeted, and there's a variance. This is introducing a benchmark. It's introducing another dimension, so we can get we can get a sense of, well, how are we actually performing compared to others. So it gives you a new dimension. The benchmark is made up of a composite. It's a composite index. It's using a weighting of various, like the bank bill rate, the 4-year swap rate. Importantly, with this one, we would get and then it's measured over a 12-monthly rolling basis. So it's accounting for seasonality. So we would like to start including this benchmark in our reporting, and this data, this benchmark rate, we actually get from Bancorp. So it's independently provided to us, and it's a measure of how we're tracking to the industry.
Okay, so my question is, so this is more of an information thing rather than setting anything against it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
So
for
what it
instance, when the finance minister... Oh, sorry. Yep.
Sorry, no, keep going.
No, I was just saying, so what we heard this morning, the finance minister is saying that, Reserve Bank policy is all designed to bring down, it's going to bring down inflation and interest rates inside the next 12 months. So if you took that as gospel, which would be a foolish thing to do, but if you did that, then you would, that would be that, and presumably that's an assumption that Bancorp would use. They use a variety of, so what are they basing their information on? What's happening or what they project?
Okay, so what it's actually doing is that these 30%, 15, 10, 10%, 10% are based on your treasury policy. So there is a little bit of method to the madness. We just didn't think, oh, well, this will be appropriate. So and if you don't understand this, I don't blame you at all. But we look at how much hedging you have in, say, the 0 to 2, and then the 2 to 5, and then the 2 to 4, or 2 to 5, and then 5 to 10 year time buckets. And then we assign a percentage in the benchmark, which correlates with those with what we call the midpoints of the hedging bands. So you don't get out of kilter with the hedging. This is designed to operate or be predicated off those hedging bands. And it's not perfect, as I said to Mark earlier, it's not perfect because normally when interest rates are going up, you will actually be outperforming the benchmark, and often when they're going down, you will underperform the benchmark. In other words, your borrowing costs will be higher. But it's an independent assessment, or not assessment, it doesn't assess it, it actually measures it, of how your performance is. And it's exclusive of your bank fees and margins because they differ according to councils. It's based on the Bloomberg rates or the Reuters rates every day, which are totally independent and verifiable. And it just gives you an idea of how you're going against it. But I wouldn't sort of live and die by it because but as I say, in the absence of anything else, it's the best that we have seen. And it just gives you an indication, but I wouldn't get too hung up if there are variations from it because of the changes in interest rates.
Okay, and so that's over a 12-month period. So do you kind of lock and load for 12 months, or is it iterative throughout that process?
Oh, we provide this data monthly.
All right, okay, yeah, cool.
Okay, moving on. We're going to try
Thank
and
you.
get finished before 5, so
Right.
we're going to truck on
Perfect.
quickly.
Perfect. So 23, page 23 of the Treasury Management Policy, paragraph 76, the table just outlines to who we report the compliance with the Treasury Management Policy. So again, we've just updated that. We've removed councils and committees that no longer exist, and so we future-proofed that. So it's an editorial change from officers. Then staying on page 23, paragraph 77, the policy review. What we've done is this is an editorial change. We've taken out committees that no longer exist. And we're just saying, when the policy should be reviewed, and it should be reviewed by council, which is consistent with the very first thing the policy says, that actually only the council can can review the changes and adopt the policy. So we're just bringing that change through. So the policy review is every triennium and can only be approved by council. Very quickly, pages 24 and 25, these are glossaries. They are being removed from the policy. The policy is long enough, so it's to shorten the policy. It's the Treasury Management Policy. There will be some technical terms in there. Just in the interest of time, I'm now on page 26, Appendix 2. Again, these are just officer changes. We've changed the committees that no longer exist and called them council. So approval and changing the Treasury Management Policy, the delegated authority is council. New annual borrowings are set out in the annual plan, long-term plan, that's council. Only council can adopt a long-term plan or a long-term plan or an annual plan. And approval for charging assets as security over borrowings, that would certainly be council. Page 27, no changes. Page 28, appendix, what we're doing is this table on page 28, investments and interest rate risk management, that's all been, there's a strikeout through that. We're deleting that because that's been shifted over to the last table, Appendix 3, which deals to council's authorised financial market investment parameters. Page 29, last page of the policy, this is completely new. So stuff that we've deleted throughout the policy and we've moved to the back. So this table really governs how much this governs council's investments. It says how much we can invest in authorised asset classes, which is the New Zealand government, rated local authorities, New Zealand registered banks, state-owned enterprises, corporates and financials, how much of the investment portfolio can go into either of those, what credit ratings they must have for the amount that we can invest in. And the only thing to note, to draw to your attention, Miles and I were having a chat, the New Zealand registered banks, we believe that we're a little bit light in this. So the table is currently saying that for call or term deposits, you can have 6 million with banks with those credit ratings. We've got $80 million of pre-funding, and so a 6 million and a $30 million cap is too light, particularly with our CapEx program. So we're proposing to increase 6 million to 12 million, and increase 30 million to 60, just because of the size of the term deposits and the pre-funding that council has to do. And that's it. That's.
Sorry, quick question. Oh, sorry. How constraining are the parameters of investment? So what's the range?
Just looking at this table, it does depend on who we. If we're investing with the New Zealand government, there's no constraints whatsoever, and then it is constrained by credit rating. So the lower the credit rating of the organisation that we're investing in, it's more constrained.
Yeah.
We've been through the table and we thought for all the other categories it was about right, but when we looked at the fact that we've got $80 million of pre-funding on term deposit today, and we looked at those limits, we thought actually we're going to be coming back and saying we've breached our new Treasury Management Policy. So We believe we're very constrained with the table as it is, so we'd like to make that amendment.
There are three constraints in it. There's the maximum limit is a percentage of the total portfolio. That's one. The second one is they have to have a minimum credit rating. And the third one, there's a maximum that you can invest in each one. So there's three different hoops that you have to jump through. It's very foolproof. And just to explain, I know we're nearly up to 5. The reason why it's now going to be 12, is that the first one, you can have a minimum short-term rating of A1 or A- or A. So we make quite a distinction between the ones that have an A- or A rating, or ones that have an A+ or better rating, which is the big 4 banks, and Kiwi Bank as well, which was where if not all, just the large percentage of your deposits will be. So that's why we have to have that pretty significant one, because it includes your transactional banking, cash in the bank, and other term deposits you might have as well.
So I'm going to move on to Nigel now.
Oh,
'cause
sorry,
we're-
just one quick one.
Okay. As long as
Yep.
it's quick.
Yeah. So, any of those, they presumably there's a requirement for them to be secure.
Yes, this is senior debt
Yeah.
that we're referring to. So, and the senior debt is reflected by the credit rating. If it's non-senior debt, or if it's subordinated debt, like ANZ issues subordinated debt, which ranks in the BBB, you wouldn't be allowed to invest in it under this. So actually, banks themselves have different credit ratings for different types of instruments or classes of instruments that they issue. You can't invest in them.
Cool. Martin? David first, and then Martin.
Well, I just want to make a very brief concluding comment, so it'll better be
Yeah,
the
so
last person.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so my question might not be relevant to this, and I might be off track with it, but I'd just like a little bit of direction. We talked today around, special purpose vehicles. We're looking at creating a community land trust and that sort of scenario. Not saying that we would borrow with regards to putting money or borrowing for those sorts of things, but if we were to, does there need to be an allowance to do that sort of thing in this policy, or is that something that can just be done through general business as usual?
Yes or no?
No.
Would there be anything
need-
that would be required for that in the Treasury management policy? But there's clearly some questions around how the finances would work around that trust. So let's have an explore into that at another time. Sounds good. Good point. David?
Just a very brief comment. Look, I came along to listen to this to try and get a better feeling for the policy, given the role of the Risk and Assurance Committee, and I found it very useful. But I just wanted to foreshadow, Mark, that what I'd like to do at future meetings, perhaps the next 2 meetings of that committee, is to ask you and Jing to tell us what changes you've implemented as a result of this new policy, and what have been the benefits, either in terms of reductions in interest rates, costs, or better risk management, or whatever, just to get a feel for what really have been the things here which make a difference, all right? If that's not a silly question. So I just thought I'd like to raise that at future. We've got a meeting in August, which is a bit too soon for you to do much change things, but at a later meetings, I think I'd like to pursue that general line of inquiry with you and Jing, all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, David. So look, two quick things. So Risk and Assurance are meeting 15th of August, and that's looking at the fourth quarter compliance. So assuming Council adopt the new policy on the 27th of June, then any borrowings from 1 July are under the new. So we have to change our reporting anyway. And the final, so absolutely we'll do what you asked, but we have to change our reporting. Yep, our reporting will look a bit different. So the process from here on in, so this is really just going through the changes. So Miles and I we look at the marked up version. There's been 2 little edits that have been pointed out today, so we will go through and make sure that it is all absolutely fine. We'll do those 2 process changes for Appendix 3, and then that will form part of the papers that you receive on the 27th of June. When you adopt the long-term plan, you'll adopt the new Treasury management policy as well. And we'll advise audit of the changes today.
Thank
No.
you, Mark. Thank you, Miles, for coming in on Zoom with
Pleasure.
COVID. I know that's not a pleasant thing to do, so, and appreciate all the work that's gone in the background with Mark as well. Thank you for your very intelligent questions, Nigel, and the others for your questions too. They missed that, thankfully. And thanks for your input today, David. Much appreciated.
Thank you.